はい、皆さん、こんにちは。米国特許セミナーパテントターミノロジーです。このシリーズでは、特許用語、表現などをできるだけわかりやすく解説しています。講師は米国特許弁護士であるブライアン・エプスタインさんです。今回は、視聴者の方からリクエストをいただいた、respective と each に関する問題について見ていきたいと思います。respective と each は、日本語でそれぞれや各々に対応するんですが、これらの使い方についてブライアンさんにご解説いただきます。Okay, Brian さん、we received a question about how to use each and respective. Please share your thoughts.
Sure. I want to first thank our viewer for the question. We don't have a ton of material, so if you can let us know what you're having problems with, we're happy to address it to keep the series going. Sometimes there's a phrase like, two conducting cables for an anode and a cathode. And so one type of question might be, how many cables are there in that recitation? So, for example, are there two where there is, one cable per electrode, that is one conducting cable for an anode and one conducting cable for a cathode? Or does this phrase mean that there are four, such that, there are two conducting cables for an anode and there are two conducting cables for a cathode? Like a stereotypical attorney, though, I will not be answering this question directly. However, unlike a stereotypical attorney, I will explain why, and I will present an alternative. So when we have phrases like, two conducting cables for a cathode and an anode, it's very tempting for us to try to clarify this recitation with words like each and respective. And so, this might look like each of two conducting cables for an anode and a cathode. Certainly, we can work in the word respective. We can work in the word both. And, we can keep on trying to clarify what we mean. But the addition of these words inadvertently can create new issues. It's really easy to overthink this kind of problem. We might add words continuously to attempt to clarify this relationship. But when we consider each new phrase, we realize we have created a new inadvertent meaning. Like I said, if we add respective, maybe that addresses the problem we see in the claim initially, or this recitation initially. But then we consider it a little bit more and we're like, oh, well, that's not quite what I mean. Maybe if I use the word both. And that addresses a previous concern, but now creates new issues. In this example that we have at the top, is each cable connected to both the anode and the cathode? That's what I mean. How do we clarify that we want, maybe one cable for the anode and one cable for the cathode? It's really difficult with phrases like each of the two conducting cables, even if we add words like respectively. And part of the issue is that the tone in which the words are read can change the meaning. Of course, written words carry no tone. And as a result, different people might add, when they read these recitations, they might add a mental tone differently. So, I remember working with one of my colleagues it's got to be like 10 years ago or so. And we had this conversation, and we kept trying to figure out the right way to resolve this issue. And I simply read the phrases differently. I put on a different tone to these words than he did. And so I kept saying they meant one thing, and he said they meant something else. And so we try to add another word, and I thought that meant one thing, and he thought that meant something else. And there's just no way to really resolve this issue. There's no clear answer to this question. And the fact of the matter is, it's just difficult to accurately clarify the relationship between these elements with words like a respective one, or respectively, and each, or both. And, that's not just me saying that. That's common in patent law, in American patent law. And so, for example, we have this case, Accent Packaging versus Leggett and Platt, where the Federal Circuit reversed the district court's interpretation of the phrases each and a respective one. The Federal Circuit did not tie their decision to all uses of the phrases a respective one or each. It's going to be fact specific, and it's going to be based on factors like the content of the disclosure, the preferred embodiments in the application, the prosecution history. That's how a court ultimately determines what a respective one, phrases like a respective one in each actually mean. When we're translating patent applications for prosecution in the US, we don't have any prosecution history. It might not be clear to the translator, or might be outside the scope of their assignment to consider the preferred embodiments. And so, there's not a clear way to determine this. In addition, we should consider that, a judge, a district court judge decided this Accent Packaging case. Ultimately, this judge got it wrong, but, even a judge can get it wrong. And so, I, as an attorney, am not a judge. I don't know as much as that judge. And, so it would be very presumptuous for me to say that I would get this correct, because probably I wouldn't. Or at least it would be a coin flip, right? So what do we do? So in my experience, clear claims do not recite elements in groups like two conducting cables for an anode and a cathode. Does it happen? Yes. Does it happen in foreign origin cases? Yes. Does it happen in American origin cases? Also, yes. It's just not a particularly good practice, but a lot of people do it. A lot of people kind of like introducing that kind of vagueness into their claim, so that they can adopt different positions in a litigation. Maybe I want it to look a certain way. I want to be able to take different positions in a litigation. I don't mind risking a lack of clarity. Maybe other people feel very strongly that they want clear claims. And in that case, we want to stay away from this because there's just no way to get it right. So if we're pursuing clear claims, what do we do? In that case, particularly if we want a broader claim, we might recite phrases like a first conducting cable for an anode and a second conducting cable for a cathode. Here, it's quite clear, how many cables we're talking about. I don't think there's anything preventing the first conducting cable also being for a cathode right? This is probably a comprising claim, not a consisting of claim. There could be an additional conducting cable for the anode. There's nothing that really requires that that there be this exclusion of other cables or other connections. And the better way to handle this is to just clarify, the individual connections, because ultimately when patentability is assessed, it's quite rare for duplication, having two of something to be a patentable feature. Usually that's considered prima facie obviousness or prima facie obvious. And so we'd really have to show what the benefit of having two is. And therefore, the better practice is to just get the broader claim because, it's probably not patentable simply by having a second one. So let's only claim one. And now our claim is broader and it's clearer and it's probably easier to enforce.
Okay. はい。ブライアンさん、ありがとうございました。今回は Respective と Each に関する問題について詳しく解説いただきました。今回はこれで以上になります。ご質問や扱ってほしいトピックなどがありましたら、YouTube のコメント欄に書いていただくか、スライド最後に記載のメールアドレスまでお気軽にご連絡ください。では本日はありがとうございました。失礼します。